military service record. Questions have been swirling, including allegations that Mr. Walz abandoned his fellow troops in their greatest time of need, even claims of stolen valor. Yesterday on this program, I spoke with a Minnesota National Guard veteran who has been sounding the alarm on this story for years. Tom Behrens, who took over the post, Tim Walz left when he retired just as his unit, the unit under his command, was deploying to Iraq, was on this program yesterday. And Tom made some stunning allegations. For what it's worth, the Harris-Walz campaign and the complicit media would have you believe this entire controversy is just a bunch of nonsense. But today we're going to bring you the receipts. Here's what we know. Days after the September 11th, 2001 attack on our nation, Mr. Walz re-enlisted in the National Guard for a 6-year commitment. He would later claim it was only 4. Alpha News, there in Minnesota, they've obtained the paperwork. It was 6. So I don't know why he's misleading about that, but he signed up to stay in until 2007. 2007, not 2005. In late 2003, he deployed with his unit to Italy in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Operation Enduring Freedom is also known as the war in Afghanistan. He never went to Afghanistan. He never saw active combat, nor was he part of Enduring Freedom. Again, that name is used for the war in Afghanistan. He was in a support role in Italy. In the military, these words matter. In February of 2005, okay, we're flash forwarding now 2 years from the Italy service, he filed paperwork with the Federal Election Commission to run for Congress. 1 month later, in March, his own campaign acknowledged before he retired from the National Guard, he was still in the National Guard, that he knew he might be getting deployed to Iraq.
Okay, so Megyn Kelly makes a few points in this video, but I'm going to concentrate on just one. This video goes on for about 10 minutes, but it seems like the biggest complaint people have with Tim Walz is his claim that he is a war veteran. So we're going to go over this and see if this makes sense or not. And to be clear, this is not coming from a war veteran. So this part right here is probably the most contentious. Megyn went over it, but we're going to go over it here. So in February 2005, Walz submitted official documents to run for Congress and represent Minnesota there. The next month, his National Guard unit was notified of a possible deployment to Iraq within the next 2 years. So what Megyn Kelly is claiming is that because there was this notification that his unit was going to be deployed to Iraq, that this means he's dodging. I don't think this quite makes sense, and I'll explain why. First of all, in 2005, Walz was 41 years old, and if we go over here, we can see that he was already eligible for retirement. In 2001, he completed the 20 years of service needed for retirement from the Guard, but he re-enlisted after the September 11, 2001 attacks. Notice they leave that part out. And this is not coming from someone who's necessarily going to vote for Kamala Harris, but I think we do have to be fair here because both sides are going to go really hard on the other. And while it's a terrible thing to misrepresent your service, it's also kind of a terrible thing for someone, especially someone like Megyn Kelly, to accuse someone of faking their service, or in this case, she's actually accusing him of being a wimp that didn't want to go over to Iraq. Megyn Kelly is someone who supported the Iraq War for years, even when she was on Fox News, but then later, like pretty much everyone, turned on it and realized it was not a good idea.
In your op-ed, you write as follows: rarely has a U.S. president been so wrong about so much at the expense of so many. But time and time again, history has proven that you got it wrong as well in Iraq, sir. You said there was no doubt Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. You said we would be greeted as liberators. You said the Iraq insurgency was in the last throes back in 2005. And you said that after our intervention, extremists would have to, quote, rethink their strategy of jihad. Now, with almost $1 trillion spent there, with 4,500 American lives lost there, what do you say to those who say you were so wrong about so much at the expense of so many?
No, I just fundamentally disagree, Megyn. You've got to go back and look at the track record. We inherited a situation where there was no doubt in anybody's mind about the extent of Saddam's involvement in weapons of mass destruction.
So I do think you have to be careful. If someone's in the military, especially since Megyn Kelly interviewed someone who used to work with Walz. He worked under him. This guy was pretty angry and thought that Walz kind of abandoned them. That's his perspective, and that makes a lot more sense coming from him than it does from like Megyn Kelly, who never served in the armed services. If someone in the armed services wants to say that, hey, listen, if you get a notification of a possible deployment, you have to stay in. That's a lot different than someone who has never served in the military. It's like, hey, this guy's a wimp. He's 41 years old. Well, he's got to stay for at least a couple more years. All right, so in February 2005, he submitted documents to run for Congress. The next month, so that'd be March 2005, he was notified of a possible deployment to Iraq. And then he retired officially from the military service in May 2005. So February, submitted documents, March, possible deployment, and then May 2005, he retired. To me, this kind of means he's in the clear. A possible deployment, I mean, can you just never retire because there's a possible deployment? Even if you're 41 years old? And like I said, he already was eligible for retirement after 20 years in 2001. He served for 24 years. And in 2001, it would have been 20 years. So he already could have retired. Okay, so here we get to, according to the Minnesota National Guard, Walz retired before his unit was officially notified in July 2005 of their confirmed deployment to Iraq. So he retires in May 2005. Then 2 months later, they get an official notification that his unit's going to be deployed to Iraq, with his unit mobilizing in September 2005 and moving to Iraq in March 2006. So fully 2 months. He retires 2 months before they're actually officially notified of deployment. So all she's hanging on is that there was a possibility of a deployment. That just seems a little, especially coming from someone who did serve in the military. Like I said, I really do want to sparse this. The people that are in the military criticizing him, that makes a lot more sense. The people that weren't in the military saying that somehow in his 40s he just has to stay in there. And also, we're still in Iraq. I can see how many troops we still have in there. I think we have around like 3,000. Yeah, the U.S. has roughly 2,500 troops currently in Iraq. This is in 2024, since December 2021. Military announced the end of its combat role in the country. Does the combat role ever officially end? So we still have troops in Iraq. So it's just like, when is he allowed to retire? I don't know. As someone who didn't serve in the armed forces, I really have a hard time criticizing him too much for this. I mean, am I going to call him a wimp? And even if it was the case that he was like, listen, I'd rather be in Congress than go to Iraq, or maybe he didn't possibly believe in the Iraq war. It seems like he supported the Afghanistan one, since he did, as Megyn Kelly mentioned. Well, he re-enlisted after September 11th, but he did serve overseas in Italy. Did they say it here? Yeah, deployed with the Minnesota National Guard to Italy for 9 months to serve with the European Security Force in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, which would be Afghanistan. 844 United States troops were killed in Iraq in 2005 alone. I think he gets a little bit of a pass on this one. If you're someone who worked with him at the time, I can understand being angry, as that guy was who was on Megyn Kelly's show. But that's a guy who actually worked with him and who actually was sent into Iraq. He has reason to complain about Walz, at least from his perspective. It makes more sense. But Megyn Kelly, nah, I don't think so. A lot of the other Republicans, or really anyone, I think this is a bit of a nitpick. I mean, for Megyn Kelly to say that the Iraq war was good, support it, and then say it was bad, but also Walz should have been stayed in his early 40s and just stayed in and been drafted into Iraq, and that he's a wimp for not doing so. As she said, he abandoned his crew. Well, when can he ever retire? I mean, technically he's a sergeant, so there's always going to be people under him that are going to feel abandoned. So he can just never retire? And once again, we still have troops in Iraq, so that's my take on it. I'm sure it's going to be non-controversial. Nah, I think it'll be alright. Alright, toodles.